Chair. It's a shame that we don't have the pleasure of John's company. John Biscowan earlier, when he was doing his contribution, said that those on the very lowest income should be terribly grateful that they got 85 cents or some such in the budget, because he said they could have gotten nothing. Well, he's quite right, actually. This John Key's government did have a choice about who was going to benefit the most from this budget and who would benefit the most from the personal tax cuts that are in this legislation. And his decision was certainly that it wasn't going to be those on the lowest incomes who would benefit the most. It certainly was not that we should have a progressive and fair tax system and progressive and fair tax cuts in this budget, but John Key's choice was that the richest people in this country, the richest New Zealanders, should be the ones who benefit the most, and we certainly see that that is the case. Because, of course, John Key could have chosen differently, and he did not. He has chosen to increase the gap between rich and poor, but he did not. Now, earlier I talked about the alternative. Oh, here's John. Earlier I talked about the alternative to this tax cut regime, one that would be progressive and fair, which is having a zero tax rate for the first $10,000 of income earned. And I just would mention, in relation to that not only is it progressive, fair and cheaper than the current tax cuts that are proposed in this budget and in this bill, but it's also used in many other countries around the world, in OECD countries. In Australia it's 16,000, in Canada it's 10,000, in France it's 5,600, in Germany it's 7,800. We certainly would not be leading the charge on a tax-free band of income that is progressive and benefits those on the lowest incomes if we were to do it. But of course, in those countries too, they have much higher tax rates at the top. So in Australia, for example, there's a 45% tax rate for those on incomes earning over $180,000. So it is a progressive system of tax, or more progressive there than we certainly have here. And so one of the other provisions in this bill and in this part is the increase in GST. Again, an additional regressive tax on top of the regressive personal tax cuts that is being proposed in this legislation. The increase in GST is not fair. It will hurt the poor more. We know that those on the lowest lowest 10th percentile pay 14% of their income in GST, and those at the very top only pay 4%. So proportionally, those at the very bottom are the ones who will be paying more GST out of their income, in proportion to their income, than those at the very top. So any increase in GST is grossly unfair. And that is why the Green Party continues to propose a much fairer system, which is a capital gains tax, excluding the family home, which in the long term would return some $4.5 billion to the New Zealand income, but would also broaden the tax base across the community and provide significant incentives for a shift in investment away from the property sector into more productive investment. That is what this John Key's government says they want to do, but what they have is done nothing to make sure that that happens. No kind of strategy to ensure a genuine shift of productive investment away from the property boom into more productive areas. But see, I also want to talk about another choice the government had around tax cuts and how those on the lowest incomes could benefit, because of course inequality is the single biggest issue, one of the biggest issues that this country faces. And on Monday in our Mind the Gap package, we also proposed that the in-work tax credit, which only applies to some families in this country, should be extended so that it applies to all families, so that it applies to those families at the very bottom of the income sector. And one of those families, in fact, are beneficiary families. There are 140,000 families who do not qualify for the in-work tax credit because they are beneficiaries or they don't meet the hours criteria. And these are families with children who are living in the worst poverty. We know that there are some 200,000 children in this country living in the worst poverty, and they are the children of these families. So why are these children suffering because John Key wants to could put thousands of dollars in the back pocket of some very, very rich people. It would cost around $300 million a year, so it does have a cost. Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I rise along with my colleagues and I want to commend Matera Ture for a great